Welcome back to the show, everyone. My name is Brian Elam. I will be your host on this episode of the Be Successful series here on Get Your Entrepreneurship Together. And today is going to be a fun conversation. I just know it already. The guy that I have here with us, Adam, he is not only a fellow musician, a music lover, a rocker like myself, he's also an entrepreneur. He has coached people and has a very unique operating system to help businesses grow and achieve their maximum potential. So, Adam, thank you so much for coming on. I cannot wait to get into your story and just drop value bombs.
Absolutely, Brian. That's why we do this, right? Thank you so much for having me. This is a pleasure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, let's just dive right in. You started your working career, at least as far as I could tell from what I read about you, as a high school band director.
Yeah.
Now, I spent my entire schooling years in band. I am a band geek. I was a member of the drum line and continue to play drums in bands going forward. But it's a very interesting switch. Like, what made you go from high school band director to getting into the military?
Well, it's just that classic story of, you graduate with a degree in music and the next best thing, the next obvious thing is to join the army, right? Um,
I mean, that's what I did, you know.
right, right. No, I think it was one of those things where it was a unmet need that had been there for quite some time. I was a class of '01. So I was 18 years old, fresh out of high school when 9/11 happened. And there's something about being a young man in a very rural part of the country with a family history of military service in multiple wars dating back to the Civil War, really, when my family arrived just before the Civil War. And in every major war, someone in my family has fought in it. And this war came and none of us were in it. Um, and so when I graduated college, it was it was the opportunity that I still had there that if I would have waited, wouldn't have been there anymore because I was going to get married. I was going to have, you're going to start your life. And
Right.
as it turns out, it went from, hey, let me go to the military for a little bit and do my service into a full 12-year career where I went all the way down the military rabbit hole into some very specialized, shall we say, clandestine units. It was a fun career.
Yeah, and we're definitely gonna get into that. So there was some kind, you mentioned an unmet need to fill that gap. Now, was that coming from this longing to be a part of, the attack that took place on our country? Was it a combination of that and plus the family history that you had, or what was that unmet need?
Think now that I haven't thought about this in a while, so this is a really good exercise to like reflect back. It's funny the idea of what responsibility does for us, where you feel like something is your responsibility and something is something you should be doing, and how like that's a very powerful instinct and one that stays with you. And I guess looking back, I felt watching classmates of mine go, watching the news, watching young men my age be engaged in this, and I wasn't. I felt like it was my responsibility to be part of that for better or worse. And so, like, I was in my senior year meeting with recruiters, like, and I graduated, and 6 weeks after graduation, shipped off to boot camp. So I think it was a combination of family that certainly was the primary drive or the initial driver. But I think as time went on, as you watched everything unfold on TV, it became a sense of responsibility.
All right, that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, I had those same thoughts when I was going through school, because when I was in, like, towards the end of middle school, that was like 1994. I mean, we were in, Desert Shield, we were in Desert Storm, and as I was coming up into high school and getting ready to graduate, obviously we were still deployed over there and doing things and on that battlefield. And I had those thoughts of, because my grandfather had served in the Korean War. So I
Right.
have that a little family history in my family as well. And I don't know, it just, for me, it just broke down to the fact that, yeah, service would be great. The experience that I would get, the values that I would learn, obviously would be amazing, but I just wasn't willing to put my neck on the line like that.
Yeah.
So I commend you for your service. Thank you for your service, and I truly appreciate what you've done.
Absolutely. It was the honor of a lifetime, and I'm still doing it, actually. I'm a reservist now, coming up on 18 and a half years as of the time of this recording. So I'm knocking on the door of full retirement coming soon, and I'm very ready to be done. I'm ready to hang up the boots for good.
Well, that's fair. And I think you've definitely earned that retirement. And I'm sure it's going to be with distinction. So that's awesome. Now, getting into your military career, I'm wondering if you can tell us what kind of operations were you involved in? I know you were doing, strategic planning and things like this. Now, was that in logistics or was that in some other type of operations?
Very different. So I really had two military careers. I was recruited in as a musician, coming from music school with a trumpet player, having a dual degree in trumpet performance and music education. So I was actually initially recruited to be a bugler. And I spent a couple of years playing taps, playing military ceremonies, got to like play for the president a couple of times, met Colin Powell, like all those fun things. But I was on Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which is home of the airborne and special operations. So I was with an airborne unit the whole time. And funny, those units, they're very special. The kind of people that join them, special in a what's wrong with you and also specialized training kind of way. Um, I ended up getting recruited into special ops. So specifically a discipline called psychological warfare. So I became very well trained. The training for psychological warfare is over a year long. Learned another language, learned all sorts of fun stuff. First was introduced to Cialdini and persuasion and influence tactics. So that really that was the bulk of my military career was in psychological warfare. And really, there's almost three stages to it. When I first got out of school, we were still wrapping up the Al Qaeda kind of global war on terrorism front. Then we had a brief like 6 months of woo, there's nothing going on, and then ISIS came along, and so then we had to do the whole ISIS thing, which was another 3 years of chasing ISIS around the world, doing special operations against them. And then in the tail end of my career was right as it was called Operation Max Pressure, and it was against the North Koreans to bring them to the negotiating table.
Hmm.
So it was really like 2017 through 18 and into 19. I guess they officially had peace talks after I had already left active duty. But a lot of the work that I did, the strategic planning, a lot of things that went into bringing the North Koreans to the negotiating table, all of that was very deliberate. And it was U.S. Army Special Operations. It was Department of State, Department of Justice. It was a whole of government approach that was organized in order to bring the North Koreans to that table.
Uh, that's incredible. So with you doing that, being in psychological warfare, are you I don't, obviously we're not going to dispel
Of
state
course.
secrets here, but
Yeah.
was this using like the internet? Were you using like media? Were you what kinds of things were you using to help get the result you were looking to get?
Yeah, it was social marketing. And to bring an analogy to civilian life, it's social marketing. So like the traditional social marketing that we think of is only you can prevent forest fires, the old Smokey the Bear campaign. Well, take that same kind of paradigm, that same kind of messaging construct, and put it to counterterrorism, where instead of only you can prevent forest fires, only you can prevent suicide bombings. Obviously, I'm like really simplifying it, but that's the kind of things that we were putting into the environment. A lot of it was very overt, very deliberate. We'd put it in national magazines. We'd put it on televisions. There's a radio station called I'm drawing a blank here, but it's like a U.S. State Department ran radio station, Radio Free. Yeah. So we'd put messages out onto there. That was the more overt. type of messaging we were doing. Some of the more under the surface was working with our foreign government counterparts in other countries that we were working in. There was a bit of military deception, and we start to get down rabbit holes that we won't explore. Let's just say they are classified for a reason. But it was all using information in order to, here's our desired output, here's what we want to see from the enemy or from our neighbor or friends, and how are we going to extract that behavior from them. So a lot of the same things we see with more traditional marketing, it's just the behavior we're looking for is very different. In marketing, we're looking for a purchase, a conversion point. I'm looking for a conversion point too when I'm conducting psychological warfare. It's just something very different.
Right, right. And when you were at the end of your military career, or at least the active duty part of it, and you were transitioning into civilian life, getting into figuring out what you wanted to do next, like how did you get hooked up with that next venture? Or and did your time in the military, did that form your smooth operations system, or did that come later?
That came later. I like to. The funny story is I kind of fell into entrepreneurship and fell into marketing literally. Because I was doing an exercise one day. It was in 2017, and I was coming off a wall on an obstacle course, and I came off wrong, and I broke my ankle. And so 3 surgeries later, I'm hung up. I'm in bed. I can't move. Not really something that a guy like me is used to doing, being told to sit still for a couple months while my leg heals. It was during that time frame that I first discovered Russell Brunson. I was on the internet just figuring out what I wanted to do when I grew up, when I got out of the military. And I found .com Secrets, the book. I read it 3 times in a week. And within really a month, I was doing gigs. I had gotten a profile on Upwork. I was bidding on gigs. I was moonlighting, doing marketing while still on active duty. And I found this music company out of London, England, called Musical You. They were looking for a marketing manager to come in, and as that company was growing, and it felt like this wonderful opportunity to come back to music, apply some of my skills that I learned not only from Russell and from that whole exploration into marketing, but also some of the more strategic ways I have of looking at things now from my military background. It was really a meshing of 3 different parts of my life all coming together in this new job opportunity.
Yeah. So was there a moment when you realized, oh, all of these things that I've been trained in the military to do, all of these things, or at least some of them, can translate into the business world? Like, was there an aha moment when that hit, or was it something you just knew it immediately as soon as you found entrepreneurship?
I think it was a delayed effect. Initially, I wanted to separate from my past as much as I could. I wanted to let go of the military background. I wanted to let go of the things that I had done and that I had seen and been a part of. And it was really when Musical You we went through, it was kind of muddled along for a couple of years. We grow by 5%, 10%, like nothing crazy, nothing to write home about. But during the pandemic, when the online companies were doing education, basically did one of 2 things. They either, shut their eyes and pretended not to understand what was happening and not to understand the opportunity, or they did what we did and we doubled down and went to serious work. Those initial months when everyone was watching Tiger King, I was working 18-hour days because suddenly everything we had been trying for years in marketing started to work. And so we were achieving 300% growth month over month versus 10% year over year. It was then I really, wow, all these things I've done my whole life have really come together. I went through a bit of some self-care and some therapy to help put them together for me and to get over some hangups that I still had. But by the end of 2020, I was a well-oiled machine, and it was all hands on deck. Let's go. And it really hasn't stopped since then. It's been pretty much continuous.
Now, what was it, COVID that opened the floodgate? Because you essentially hadn't changed in the way that I understand it. You hadn't changed the marketing that you were doing from before COVID to when it hit and everything shut down. So was that the missing piece that brought the attention to you and then you just grew it from there?
I think it's simplistic to say that it was COVID that did it, but rather we had there was no safety net. You know, we were a small company. We didn't have VC backers. We didn't have government connections. I wasn't even technically an employee. I was a contractor. There was no unemployment waiting for me if the company went under. If you had unemployment waiting for you, God bless. That's cool. I didn't. And so we were in a do or die, survive or don't scenario. And so every idea we had ever had for marketing for the past however many crazy ideas you had, it's let's try them all.
I
So
see.
could that have worked without everything else happening? You know what? Now that I'm like a couple years removed from it, I believe it could have. But it was that moment in time saying, do or die, survive or don't, no safety net, put everything out there and see what takes off. It was that deliberate action of just throwing it all out there that really is because, yeah, we threw like together 18 or 20 different marketing campaigns. 3 took off. The other 17 were failures, but 3 took off. And if we had done that earlier, could it have happened 6 months, a year earlier? Probably. But that moment in time forced us to get off our butts, get out of our comfort zones, and go for it.
Perfect. Yep, that's exactly the clarity that I was looking for with that story. So thank you so much for that. And it just goes to show you that you can't be afraid to try things. You can't be afraid to not have them work. A phrase that is said all the time in the entrepreneurship space, there's no such thing as failure if you learn the lesson and don't quit.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so thinking about, what you've learned in your career in psyops and all of this, and relating that to entrepreneurship. So we all want to be more influential. We all want to obviously get someone to opt in, create that lead magnet, or get that sale. How can you help someone become more influential and more persuasive in their business and in their marketing?
Yeah. It's a very good question and one that I'm continuously after myself because this is the tough part, right? It's connecting these pieces and these different learning points. I would say the first thing is like remove your own attachment to it. Like we tell ourselves what our opt-in does, what our program does. It doesn't matter what we think, it matters what our prospect thinks. It's studying your target audience in a really visceral way. Before I run an ad, before I do an opt-in, I will read 40, 50, 100 Facebook posts, blogs, discussion threads, like see what people are actually saying, the words that they're using to describe something, a problem they're having, something that's in their way, some sort of anxiety that they're feeling over something. That's the root of the problem that you need to get after. It's listening to your target audience, seeing what they're saying exactly, and then applying your language to be the answer to their often unasked question. So that thorough understanding is probably the most skipped over step I've found when people get out into their marketing. And it's really just staying solution oriented. Like get past like the here and now and work towards people's broader goals and aspirations. Those are sometimes business related, but more than anything, it's about us. Like
Mhm.
because we do make this thing called business very personal. I often say, like, people say, it's not personal, this is business. We're entrepreneurs. This is the most personal thing we do, period. There's more of us wrapped up in this than almost anything else. Sorry, kids, they're not listening, but they're in the other room. But this is very personal to us. So understand that that is where your target audience is, especially if you're in the B2B space, and speak to that higher level that they're trying to achieve. If we remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you haven't studied it, study it. It's great. Maslow's hierarchy, it's a simple triangle saying, hey, once you have your like basic items of survival met, now you can start thinking of higher levels. Well, in actual like application, Maslow's hierarchy is not like a pure triangle. It's more like a grid. Because even the very early humans that hadn't figured out fire yet were already thinking about God. We're always thinking of that higher level of self-fulfillment and self-awareness, even when we're still starving. It's been the human experience for thousands of years. but just speaking to those different levels of needs that Maslow has taught us, boy, that's where you start to really get some energy when you can speak to the higher level versus just like fix your leads. It's not about fixing their leads. It's about something that they're not telling you that they're trying to fix.
Right. And when you're doing all this research before you even put the marketing campaign out, do you do any kind of testing before you release it to kind of get feedback from, hey, I think this is actually what's going on. This is the real problem that you want fixed. Am I correct? Do you do any kind of that market testing?
Yeah, very much so. There's a couple of different ways to do it, and it kind of depends on what kind of audience you have. So if you have an established audience, you have a lead magnet or have an email list, and if you're not doing surveys to your audience before you launch something, you're missing on a tremendous opportunity. Survey your audience on a regular basis, get them on interviews, get into discussions with them. I used to love always doing like a face-to-face testimonial video just like this on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do I need to spend that hour? Absolutely not. I can just say, hey, send me a video. Here's your talking points. But what am I really asking during that 60 minutes I'm spending with someone to get a 2-minute clip? I'm asking all the unasked questions, all the stuff in between, all the gray areas. I'm extracting information from them by just letting them talk. People will tell you things just by you asking the right question. And you're going, yeah, I know. I'm hosting a podcast. That's what we do here. It's almost like a podcast interview in so many ways. We're asking questions, trying to extract information. That's a couple of ways you can do it. If you don't have an audience and you're launching a program for the first time or even a lead magnet and you're like, I don't know if this will work, get some ad dollars behind it, test it rapidly to a cold audience to see if it does convert and pay attention what those numbers are telling you. Um, I I can't stand putting something on a page and just like, hey, maybe it'll work. You don't have enough traffic to tell you that. You have to get some ad dollars to it to get the right amount of impressions and page views to really be able to tell you whether something's going to work. Cold, long-term, organic, like all those things that we're trying to do. Some ad dollars will really help unveil that and help you fix landing pages really quickly.
Interesting. Yeah. Super, super valuable points here to poll your audience, understand what they're really thinking, what they really need, and then, yeah, get some ad dollars behind your testing because you're right. You can't just build it and they will come when it comes to landing pages or funnels or anything like that. I love Russell as well, but you know, you might be one funnel away, but not if nobody knows where it is.
Well, true. And it's never the first funnel. That's my favorite Russell quote ever. He said it was that funnel hacking live 22. He's like, I said you were one funnel away. I didn't say it was the first one, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, you bet. Yeah, it's never the first one. It's never
No.
your first time picking up an instrument, your first time speaking on stage. It is never that. And it was definitely not my first time trying to be on camera.
Yeah. Right. Oh man. Woo. That was interesting, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. I wish I could find that video recording that I made of me in the apartment with the yellow lights and not knowing what I was gonna say, just stumbling all over myself. Yeah,
What year
beautiful.
was it? What year was that in?
Oh, that would have been I think 2017.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. We've come a long way since then.
I always loved when we first started, like you needed a script. Like
Yeah,
you
oh,
needed like to have this thing like super prepared. I used to do rehearsals. Like I'd practice my delivery. I don't need to do it anymore because practice,
right.
repetition. And now I'm just like I just jot some notes down on a post-it note. I'm like, okay, record, let's go. We'll figure it out in post if we got to.
Yes, yes, exactly. And you mentioned scripts. It reminds me of another funny moment that I had reviewing old videos. I had set my camera up and then I had put a music stand right next to it with what I was going to say written out on there. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to be so professional. This is going to look amazing. And I did it and it flowed really awesome. And I went back and I looked at the video and I just watched my eyes go back and forth from the camera to the. I was like, oh, this is
Really
terrible.
not good. I should check out one of those teleprompter things I've heard about.
Oh, I have one.
Yeah, I do too.
Game changer.
Game changer, and yet like the first, if you do it like 10 the first 10 times are horrible until
It
you
takes a little bit. Yeah,
yeah, until you figure out like how to read and still maintain eye contact. It's funky, but there's something to it. And I think it's an interesting point because like there's so much to that art of performance. Like I don't want to say like we're performers, but we kind of are dancing monkeys in a certain way in this field, right? And so much of our background as musicians plays into this
for
because
sure.
we come from a background of practice, repetition, and here's the hard part for you non-musicians to ever have to do: it's listening to yourself do it. Listening to your own podcast episodes back or watching your own videos before you release them is just about the most painful thing in the world until you get over yourself.
Yep.
But there's something beautiful that happens when you can do that. You improve rapidly because you're like, oh my gosh, what a goober moment. And you have to be able, you have to be okay with telling yourself that. But the learning all comes in recording and watching yourself and just being super uncomfortable with it. Get over it. It's gonna be fine, I promise.
Yep. 100%. There was a very big lesson that I learned from recording myself and being on camera consistently, is that I was using the word so as like a bridge before every phrase. I I finally got to the point where I was like, I'm editing every single one of these out in post. It took so much time. But if you have that ability, like you said, to get over yourself and just listen and understand, okay, that's where this is coming from. So if I just put a little bit of attention to myself when I speak, I can get rid of that pattern and save
Mm-hmm.
myself like an hour of editing.
Oh, see, I had a different way of approaching it. I've never edit ever.
Oh,
And so whatever every screw up I do is going, especially on the podcast, because I have my own too. And when I'm doing my solo episodes, I never edit. If I screwed up, it's in there and I got to own it. So it's like another level of pressure before I hit record. It's all good. Love it.
I get that. And, you know, and from somebody coming from the military background and actually being in some hairy situations, I'm sure you're adept at dealing with that kind of pressure. And you probably thrive in it, actually.
It gives you a good edge. And I think so much like it, there's something about having an edge and having like a little fire under your, you know what, like it's a, I can honestly say this is the first time I've explored this topic aloud. So I'm thinking through how it works now functionally live here on in an interview. This is exciting. But there is a fight or flight response that I think is in all of us. And when putting yourself in that situation is what ignites it. So one thing I actually teach my students is like initiating that fight or flight response. It's hormones, it's chemicals that go through our body when we do it. It's the reason I do a cold plunge every day, because it initiates that fight or flight. It
Mm.
makes you like thrive in that tension in that moment, and it just propels you for the rest of the day when you can like when you can access those chemicals at will. Oh man, now I'm like thinking of how many ways I can do this a day and not wear myself out.
Yeah, that's the other thing. You can't you don't want to get to the point where you're doing it so much, taking your body through those highs and lows that you're burning out your adrenals. That is
Right.
definitely not what you want. Adrenal fatigue is no bueno.
Yeah. Good point. Thanks for the warning on that one. I haven't experienced it yet, but I'll let you know.
Yeah, I used to work for my chiropractor. I spent my previous career was in massage therapy, and I worked as
Okay.
his assistant for a while. He does nutritional counseling as well. Shout out Dr. Timko over at Gonstead Spine Institute. So I became uniquely aware through actually my own addiction to caffeine that I was messing up my adrenals. And I was tired all the time, no matter how much sleep I had, no matter if I had some coffee or not. I was just freaking tired. And he got with me on that and was like, well, it's because you're drinking caffeine every day. and you're going, 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 and you're just burning yourself out. Try to get off of it and allow your adrenals to reset. And it
Mm.
took probably 3 months before things really, got back to quote unquote normal. But yeah, it's something I've lived. So I just wanted to mention that because I could see your wheels turning and burning. I'm like, oh boy.
But yeah, caffeine, that's one. I'll revisit caffeine in like 6 months. Now that you mentioned, I'm like, gosh, I got to give that up too, don't I? Because I just gave up alcohol.
Oh yeah.
I'm on day 70 of no alcohol whatsoever, and I'm feeling like $1,000,000. I tell you what, great decision. Even went out to a bar with my friends last night and didn't have a drop, and had a great time. It was awesome. But like the biohacking, I'm hooked on biohacking now. It's a good thing.
Yep. And that whole kicking alcohol, that's really starting to take hold in the narrative too. Like a lot more people are getting what they call sober curious, which
Yeah.
I think is an interesting term. But, for me,
I
it's
was
like,
sober curious for 6 months. I identify with that, man. It's good.
yeah. And honestly, if it's caffeine, if it's alcohol, if it's whatever it is, my whole stance on it is moderation. Just don't go
Yeah.
overboard with the stuff and live your life. Live your
See,
life.
and
Just
that's the
don't go
problem. I
overboard.
don't do moderation in almost anything. I'm like
Ah,
all
see.
in.
Well,
I don't have a middle ground. It's either don't do it or you're doing it's all the way. And so I think that's partially knowing yourself and just like how you respond to stimuli and what you're hard to believe I'm a high D on the disc profile and how I'd like to jump into things.
yeah, that makes no sense at all.
No sense at all. No.
Oh, this is fun. Fun stuff, man. Well, I wanted, this was been a good rabbit hole. I'm sure somebody needed to hear that for their own health journey. So I'm glad that we
Mhm.
went down that rabbit hole. But I want to bring us back into entrepreneurship. And you made an analogy in the material that you sent over to your smooth operating system basically being like an engine.
Yeah.
And I loved that analogy that you made of the engine. So bring us into your smooth operator system through that engine analogy. I really want people to hear this.
Yeah, man. If we think about any business 95% of business is a series of tasks that happen repeatedly over time. There's a Monday task, a Tuesday task, an end of the week task. And you can almost start to see your business in terms of gears that are turning and burning and making things move. It's not only like your marketing systems, but your content producing systems, like all these things. You have to find a way to get some of these things to run on autopilot and really have them enabled by people. So what I help entrepreneurs do is pull that knowledge out. Usually it's in your head or it's in a Google Doc or it's something. We're going to use a project management system to propel that forward. Document everything, have it in a series of steps, have things repeatable, have things scheduled so that it can indeed run itself in the fact that task management is now being organized within a system. And then it's about employing someone in your company. By the way, entrepreneurs, it usually can't be you. You're too close to it. It's someone else you bring in to actually manage that system for you to keep it running. At the end of the day, we talk about being an engine and a system. Yes, it is 100%, but it's usually a system of people that are going in there and actually doing the manual inputs. So we have to remember our people that are part of this as well. Um, and so I like routine. I like things done in a pattern and systems, and people do respond to patterns. So how many different ways can we make patterns into their life? Um, when you do that and people have predictability, hey, Tuesday's the day I do our social media post for the week and they get to do all the social media posts. Oh, it's Wednesday. Wednesday's the day I do our email marketing and what we're getting ready for. Thursday's the day we do this. It's that repetition that gets you into momentum because now you're able to operate from a place of highest contribution. If you think about so much of what we're doing on a day to day, especially if you're in a startup mode, like you're jumping from task to task to task usually, right? There's a certain amount of energy that's lost in between each one of those tasks and a certain amount of time that's required to refocus. This takes that out of that equation and allows people to focus on one task at a time, knowing what's coming next. So that's a big way of saying it is really about project management. It's about having things organized and then having that operator, that second in command, to manage it for you and to be able to change, adapt, and input new things when we need to.
And what I love about this system that you've designed and come up with is it's not only applicable to a process that needs to run in the business, like email marketing. You can apply this to the actual person who is running the department, and you can essentially do all of that organizing and planning things out when it comes to their job and their duties, and you can make a turnover or a promotion more seamless, right?
Oh, 100%. Yes, it becomes more seamless. Everything, because everything's run off, you have a playbook. You have a way of doing things and you're following the playbook. What I really love about this at scale is it allows the entrepreneur, if you're just like running a company and kind of keeping it on homeostasis, just keep normal growth, 2 to 5 to 10%. An entrepreneur can run a company that's using one of these systems in an hour and a half a day at most. It's really just about checking in with your operator. They're the ones who are running the company for you. You come in, give your strategic inputs, and let the operator go implement them. But you, as the entrepreneur, you stay at the 25,000 foot level. This is how Alex Hermosi is running like 47 businesses at a time. It's because he's actually using this exact type of system. We both learned it from the same person. So it's exactly how Hermosi's operating.
Okay, so now I'm super curious because I do follow Alex and watch his content. And I
Mm-hmm.
had no idea that he didn't come up with that system of running his business. So who is that person? Are you allowed to say?
Yeah, we both learned it from a guy named Alex Sharfin. Alex is, I mean, he's been a godsend for me. He came into my life at the exact right time. And it was funny. He has like multiple different levels to his coaching because I like to be influential and work my way into rooms I'm not supposed to be in all the time. I was at like the lowest level of his coaching, and I found myself frequently in the higher levels that I wasn't supposed to be in because I wasn't paying for them. Kind of funny how that works out when you become influential.
Hmm.
But it's Sharfin's coaching system that really taught me a lot of this, and then I put a lot of my own spins on it to make it work for me, and especially from a project management side of things, especially from a strategic planning side of things, I should say. It's a couple of different like major approaches we can use, whether it's like a waterfall methodology or like a Scrum based methodology. I tried the waterfall. It doesn't really jive for me. Scrum, I love working in sprints anyway. It's how I live my life.
Hmm.
So like Scrum really works for me, even from a strategic management side of things.
Now, to that point, when you're working with people or other organizations, do you have do you have different arrows in your quiver when it comes to how to implement these things? Like you're talking about waterfall, you're talking about Scrum. Obviously, one might not be right for a certain company, but do you
Of
have
course.
the frameworks to implement different ways of doing the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of it's really just adapting what will work. But more than anything, it's about letting system creation be organic. I, as a coach, am a guide. I cannot come into your company with rare exception. I've tried this before and everything has to work just right and it requires a lot of work on my end to make it work right. But if I just come into your company and I install an operating system and I leave, that operating system will fail because it's going to be like a heart transplant where you don't have the right blood type.
Mm,
If it's not organic to the company, it will fail. So when I do come into a company, and it's happened now several times where those just pay, hey, we don't want to learn how to do this, just do it. I'm like, okay, that's fine. We can do that, but it's going to require like steady conversations between us to make sure whatever I'm designing has your input, even if you don't realize I'm extracting your input, because I need to make this operating system organic for you so that it has a chance of working. But more than anything, with 90% of my clients, it's about steering them in the right direction, letting it become organic for what they know works for them, so that that operating system will become a part of the ecosystem.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. And I'm glad that you went down and described that, because it is so important for that connection to be there within
Absolutely.
that company. Absolutely. And man, Adam,
I
I can't
learned
wait.
that the hard way, where I went in and just installed one and it failed so bad I refunded the guy's money. I'm like, I'm sorry, this didn't work. And then I had another chance like 6 weeks later. I'm like, okay, I think I know how to do this time. I'm gonna undercharge this guy and just work my face off, and it worked. So there we go.
There you go. Another point back to the very beginning of our conversation about failure's only a failure if you quit. You can't be afraid to try
Absolutely.
stuff. Yeah. And
Yep.
just you refunding that guy's money, I mean, that good on you. That's obviously creating a good relationship and keeping that value in the marketplace.
Yeah. As it happens, he's coming. I have a phone call with him next week because he wants to talk to me about some more stuff. Karma is a great thing, and what you put into the world. Uh, I'm a big, I'm a very religious person, and I firmly believe that like the goodness that we put into the world is reflected back into the goodness we receive, and vice versa. So it's very circular, and it's very much connected.
Oh, I absolutely agree. 100%. And
Yeah.
speaking of karma and goodwill, we're getting down to the end of it here. So I want to make sure that we cover. You've got a new offer coming out, a new free offer called the Time Study. Now, talk
Yes.
about karma. This is a free offer that normally is within your realm of things you charge for.
Yes.
So, talk to us about that and where people can get access and what's up, what's it all about.
Sure. So all of us are notoriously bad at measuring our own time and where it's actually going. If I ask you what'd you do last week, you're going to give me the highlights, and I guarantee it's not where the most of your work actually went. Not your fault. That's human nature. The time study is a way of tracking your time over a period of time, and then inputting that into a calculator that I have as part of this system to tell you where your time is going, what types of tasks you're doing with that time. It breaks it down. So if you're feeling uncomfortable in your business, if you're like, wow, I don't know where all my time went, this is going to tell you. We can do a couple of different things with that time study. We can directly identify where your time's being wasted. We can identify what tasks you should be offloading. We can identify what task you shouldn't be doing at all because it's not contributing anything anyway. So it unlocks a lot of doors, and it's one of the most valuable things I do. To the point, even me myself, I do one at least once a quarter, every quarter, and I've been doing it that way for the last 4 years. And I keep all my time studies. They're a painful reminder of how far I've come, but it's a beautiful tool that there's no gray area in it at the end of the day, which is very useful for people like us to have just answers.
Yeah, yep. You can see just in black and white, in binary, like here's what's working, here's what's not. So you
Yep.
can really drill down into, the best uses of your time.
Yep. So it's
Absolutely.
available on my website. It's www.adamliette.com, ADAMLIETTE.com for the podcast listeners. But yeah, it's right on the front homepage, and you can find it there.
And is that the best place for people to go to as well if they're curious about, getting you involved with their organization or doing coaching with you?
Yes, absolutely. There's a couple of different ways to reach me on that website. You can also listen to my podcast, the Smooth Operator Podcast, where I have episodes going deep down the rabbit hole of the different techniques that we can use when we're managing our teams and leading our teams to growth. But ultimately, let's get on a phone call, guys. Let's do it. That's where the growth happens.
Absolutely, 100%. That connection, that real world connections, that's where it all happens. So, links are going to be down below, guys. Links to the website. I'll also link to your podcast, Adam. So, it makes it easy for them to click on there and follow you, listen to you. And this has been a blast, dude. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your stories, sharing your value, and giving us this insight into your world. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Brian. Been an absolute pleasure for all you entrepreneurs. Hey, man, get after it. The world is waiting on you. So don't keep them
Absolutely.
waiting for much longer.
That's right. There's this thing called time, and the universe isn't making any more of it for us humans. So get out there, get after it. All right, guys, share the show, share it out with the people in your network that need to see it, need to hear these stories, need to connect with Adam. Like the show if you liked it. Make sure to remember to subscribe to both the YouTube channel and the Spotify. And peace. I'll see you in the next one.